Can you hear me okay?
Hello.
It's nice to see you. You can hear me fine?
Yeah, I can hear you great. Nice to actually meet you.
You too. You
Because
too.
we've only chatted a little bit over email. And I've actually just been kind of a long time admirer of yours. And I started listening to your podcast and it's so great. I really wanted to do this because this is just a common thing that actors talk to us about is their anxiety and, jitters and what can they do when they're in that moment. And I only know so much. I can give them some like grounding techniques that I might have seen on like a meme somewhere. you know.
No, I'm happy to help. I'm happy to help.
Yeah. So I'm just so thrilled to have you. So thank you for doing this.
My pleasure.
For you guys that are just tuning in, Kimberley Quinlan is an amazing therapist who specializes in anxiety and OCD, right? And who's really kind of into the world also of cognitive behavioral therapy, right? So we'll talk a little bit about that, what that is, and how that turns into that. But I just wanted to, just to give everyone a brief overview, a little bit about you, how you came to kind of focus in this specialty and things like that.
Sure. So I'm actually an Aussie. That's where I am from,
Yep.
but I live in Los Angeles. I have lived here for 18 years.
Wow.
I, for some reason, just kept coming back to psychology. Even I was in different areas and I just loved the field of psychology. So I finally took the leap and got my master's in psychology. And the main thing I always just wanted to work with was anxiety because I feel like it is such a debilitating experience. And so many people are suffering with it. So it was kind of a no-brainer for me.
Yeah.
And then I was so lucky to sort of be able to delve into the many ways that anxiety can manifest: social anxiety, health anxiety, panic disorder, OCD. So I love the work that I do.
Yeah, and I don't think it's talked about enough. And it's definitely not something talked about in our little world with casting and actors, because so many times, and I'm guilty of saying this myself, casting directors will say, we'll want you to be confident in the room, because we want you to come in and sell it and get the role and things like that. But that can put a lot of pressure on someone. And I think sometimes they think that confidence means like you can't be nervous. You're not allowed to be nervous, which then makes them more nervous.
Right.
And this is something that I've just seen so many times in the room where they just stop and they're like, I'm so nervous, I don't know what to do right now, and I don't really know how to help them and get them out of it. And I kind of will watch them do like a downward spiral, and it's hard to get them out. So we'll talk about a little bit more of that. But you talk a lot about mindfulness too, and you start to hear that word a little bit more lately. So maybe if you want to just talk a little bit about like what that is, how maybe that could be helpful for them, and how, like, mindfulness for beginners, so to speak.
Right. Well, mindfulness is an Eastern practice that's come to the West, and we've embraced it recently, but it's actually many million, like so many years old.
Yeah.
And so basically mindfulness is pretty simple but hard to do, which is being aware and present in this moment without judging or resisting what is.
Gotcha.
So it's really about breaking things down and being very much only focused on what is actually currently happening. And that's really hard because fear is always telling you of what's going to happen in the future and the bad thing that's going to happen in the future. It rarely do we have fear about like good things happening in the future. So it's always got a negative tone to it. And often with mindfulness, well, let me go back. With anxiety, it tends to always take us to the worst case scenario. Mindfulness just brings us to what is. So you might be having anxiety. Mindfulness doesn't take your anxiety away. It allows you to access the anxiety you have right now, not the anxiety you would have if the worst case scenario happened.
Gotcha.
So it's just bringing it very much back to the present and practicing non-judgment, right? By saying this is neither good nor bad. It's just here, and we're going to meet it with kindness.
Yeah. So I guess that's a lot of thought work too, you would say?
It is. It's a lot of thought work, but believe it or not, it's actually a full body experience. So I'm going off for 1 second. I'll come back, but there is a really important concept to remember with anxiety, which is the more you try to make it go away, the more it will rise. Right? Right. And that is very paradoxical, because in most other areas of our life, if we want a problem to go away, we remove it. But that doesn't work for anxiety. And so mindfulness is often bringing the attention to the fact that anxiety is very heady, but it's very much shows up in our body as well. And so it's actually allowing physically to just allow what's happening as well. Maybe your heart rate's increasing, you're tightening in your chest, you got a lump in your throat, you feel like you're gonna, go to the bathroom any minute. Right. Like, so it is often very much here. And so mindfulness can actually be just bringing awareness to like, okay, my heart rate is increasing. I'm noticing my chest tightening. And so it can actually come down from the head and be in your body as well.
So just to also know, to kind of, I guess, to tell yourself like, yes, my heart is racing, even maybe, my vision isn't 100% or whatever, like I'm not dying. Like these are all normal things, right? Yeah.
Well, not only are they normal, they're helpful. Not in that exact moment. But remember that anxiety serves a very important function in our life. It protects us every single day from dying, ultimately. So when our brain interprets danger, it sends out hormones like cortisol and adrenaline to our body to make us feel like we could run a mile, thinking that there is a lion chasing us, right? Because that's how we were many thousands of years ago, or a beast. Now, because we don't have that immediate threat, our brain is constantly scanning for where is the possible danger, right? And it's not even the danger in the room, it's the possible danger. And so when you do notice physical discomfort, you might even just want to, like you can see me, I put my hand on my heart. You may want to just recognize like, thank you for showing up. I totally get why you would perceive this as a possible threat, but right here, I'm here in this room, I'm sitting across from this person, and like you said, some grounding techniques just to bring you back to what is really happening.
Yeah, that's such great advice for me. To be able to just physically say like, I know, because it happens a lot. I've witnessed a lot of nervous actors, and they're not even new actors, they're seasoned actors. For actors who are watching, they're series regulars who come in, especially for producer sessions, and maybe something snaps. I don't know what it is, and they feel like they can't get through it and they feel stuck. So in these sort of situations, is there anything that you might recommend that they could do before their audition? Like maybe they're driving and they start to think about it and ruminate a little bit. Are there any sort of practices maybe while they're in the room waiting and they see all these other actors who look so chill and calm, which then gets in their head, this person looks really confident and I'm not feeling that confident.
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, so simply put, and I tell this, if let's say you're having a full blown panic attack, right? So even if you're at that level, all you would need to do, and probably the only thing you could do, is just become an observer, right? And to become an observer means, what shapes do I see? What colors do I see? What does this material feel like? What does it feel like for the air to touch my skin? And keep directing yourself back to the present. And you'll hear me say that again and again. But you can make it very concrete, right? Like, what do I smell? What do I taste? So bringing it into that's super, super important. And of course, your brain's going to be like, no, the bad things. And then you can just say, okay, maybe. Like if it's saying this is going to go very terribly, you might say, okay, maybe. But right now, I'm looking for triangles, right? You know what I mean? Because I think sometimes people do is they try mindfulness, or they try to be present. And then the thought comes back and they're like, ugh, I give up. This isn't working. But that's not the practice of mindfulness, because mindfulness is and life is about, you know, temporary experiences. So you may also want to look at curiosity. Curiosity is like the coolest way to shift anxiety, which is, interesting. I'm noticing that my heart rate is increasing. What does that feel like? Right? I'm noticing, you know, as that happens, is there any other shifts in my body? Oh, I noticed my shoulders started to tighten up. You know, okay, I can drop those a little. My jaw might be tight. I might be sweating. If you are sweating, number one tool is give yourself permission to sweat.
Okay.
Because the more you the more you try not to sweat, the more your brain is going to perceive sweating as a danger, and it's going to keep sending that message out to your body.
Yeah, because I think actors, obviously, they're so concerned with how they look, how they're perceived. And so they're getting all of the, and I've seen this happen a lot, you know, sweating actors or whatever, or something that I see a lot. And it's okay. I mean, we're all human. I'm human, you know, and I see a lot of shaky hands, and that's okay. And for the most part, I'm zoomed in pretty tight on them, so I don't even see that. So there is, I see the shaking hands, I would say 70% of the time. But the difference is the actors who can get themselves out of the head is that they trust us and they know this is not part of their judgment, and also that I have their back, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit and not show the producers that. So just to speak to the actors in that way, you know, we understand and we have your back, and it's certainly not part of the test. And the other thing that I just wanted to say to actors is, and I have seen this a lot, is that they start, and I can just tell, like, you know, because I'm usually reading with them, and I'll see them just, it's like they're connected, and then they disconnect, and then they're panicking. You know, and they think they have to get through the end of the scene as if they're saving their own life, you know, like they have to swim to the land before they drowned. And so I just wanted to say, to give them permission that if you do need to stop and you feel like you're drowning, to stop and let's talk about it and practice some of those mindfulness techniques and take a moment to be that observer and say, wow, my heart's racing a little bit. I'm not acting right now. I'm totally in my head. I'm observing that, you know? And let me take it back and ask if I can do it again. Because otherwise you're just gonna go home and feel really crappy. You know? It's true.
And I think you're touching on something really important is, when we have anxiety, let's say your brain has made the mistake and it thinks there's danger in front of, you know, you're sitting across from you or whatever, your brain perceives there to be danger. Your body is preparing to run. Keep perceiving this situation to be dangerous. You're actually feeding the problem more and more. So if you actually slow down, if you can slow it down really just to the pace that you can, even though your heart's going and your head's going, if you can slow yourself down, you're actually giving feedback to your brain. Okay, we're good here. We're actually pumping the brakes, and that can actually reverse that physiological piece that's happening.
That's actually unbelievable advice, because that is what we see a lot of, is actors speeding up when they're nervous because they want to get out of there. You know, they're like, get me out of here. My life's about to end, you know? And so we see this jump in pacing, whereas when actors are able to take a deep breath and slow down, you do start to see the hands slow down. You start to see, you know, all those things start to settle, because you're sending that message to your brain. I'm not running for my life. And then all of a sudden you can put on your acting hat again, be connected, find your place, maybe do it again. You're in a better place. So I see that happen a lot. So it's great to hear that from you, because that's something that I've noticed. And I've thought, you know, that might be the case, but that makes so much sense.
I mean, this is a funny story, but I use this all the time. When I was in labor, I promise this has a point.
No,
when I was in labor,
anxiety of my life has been in labor. I totally feel you.
When I was in labor, my midwife kept saying to me, if your hands are tight, your body will not relax. Your brain doesn't know how to relax if your hands are tight. And that was a bell for me because she was talking about pain, but it's true for anxiety as well. It's very hard to actually soothe yourself if your hands are tight. In fact, I often say to people, try and be relaxed while tensing your hands up. It's almost impossible.
Right.
And so if you're really freaked, you may even want to just bring attention to your hands and just, you know, send them love and compassion and soften them as best as you can. That physiologically can help as well.
Yeah, that's so fascinating. It really is. What would you say are maybe some healthy mental habits, you know, maybe besides practicing mindfulness, that actors can practice on a day-to-day to maybe help them? Like, are there any sort of day-to-day practices that you think are helpful to manage that anxiety?
100%. So, and some of these you may have already heard, but sleep is key. Right? Getting yourself into some kind of sleep routine is very helpful. Most people find that on a night they haven't slept well, their anxiety will actually be higher. The second one is always caffeine. When I'm assessing somebody, I always ask, how much caffeine do you have? Because anything more than 2 cups a day is probably going to amp up your nervous system. If you have an event like you guys, let's say you're going in, you're trying for something, or there's a time in the day that you know you have to perform, make sure you get some exercise before that, because ultimately you're burning off energy. Right? If you're going in with all the energy in your body and it hasn't burnt off, you're more likely to have a lot of anxiety. So make sure you're getting some exercise. Interestingly too, alcohol does increase anxiety. Even if you had it yesterday, there is lots of research to show that it can sort of be a part of the side effect of that. So alcohol as well is huge. Besides that, this is the hardest one, is watch what you think. That is a huge daily practice. It's a daily practice. It's watch what you think. If you're, you know, we tend to, humans, we go to the negative bias. This is going to be bad. I'm going to suck at this. I'm going to panic. We tend to always go to negative. Be very careful with that, because really, I tell my patients and clients, if you're thinking that way, telling yourself all this negative stuff about yourself, it's sort of the equivalent of you injecting anxiety into your body. You know what I mean? It's just
start to believe it.
You feed yourself there. So if you can, I'm not saying that you need to be like, I'll be great at this, and because that's going to feel fake when you're anxious. Just stay in the center, which is, it's uncertain. I'll do the best that I can. Right? I'm going to show up and put my best foot forward, and that's the best I can ask for. So you stay out of this positive and negative bounce back, because that can be a lot of mental energy going to that.
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about cognitive behavioral therapy. Not a lot of people know what that is, and I think it's interesting for actors to hear about it. I don't actually know that much about it. I've heard of it, but I don't even know if I could define it. I just think it's a good thing to talk about. So take it away.
Well, I'll first give you some science to back it up. Cognitive behavioral therapy across the board, if you did an analysis of thousands of studies for the best treatment for anxiety, it would be cognitive behavioral therapy. So this is science-based. I try not to do anything that's not science-based. Cognitive behavioral therapy is sort of just what it sounds like. The first component is cognition, looking at your thoughts, correcting any faults that you may have, which we have a ton, right? And once you've done that, we then look at behaviors. And behavioral therapy is very much, depending on what symptoms you're having, it's where we come in and adjust behaviors, right? So let's say if someone has, they're going in for an audition and their behavior is reassurance seeking, so that they call their mom and they're like,
Right.
I'm really freaking out. Please tell me I'll be good. Or, you know, you're maybe even in the room, you're looking across from other people to try and get reassurance that
Yes.
you're doing
Yes.
well.
Yes.
Those behaviors actually cycle you back into having more anxiety.
Wow.
So we would intervene there and change that behavior by, you know, using some of the tools, the mindfulness tools that we've talked about already, or some others. Let's say your behavior is avoidance, right? As if you can go to an audition if you're not anxious, but if you are anxious, you're going to call up your manager and tell them you're not coming, right? So with avoidance, we would intervene there by slowly but surely exposing you to your fear, so that no matter how anxious you are, you could know you can get there and do the best you can. So once we combine those together, you have cognitive behavioral therapy, and that's it.
That's so interesting, because I see that happen a lot. What you were talking about with someone coming in and they'll say, you know, especially if it's a smaller role, we might say, okay, that was great. And it was great. There's a lot of other actors waiting. We kind of have to keep going. Maybe we have a call in an hour. So it's great. So they get very much in their head, and they'll say 9 times out of 10, you don't want anything different? Are you sure? And, you know, and then I start to second guess myself.
Right.
So then I'll say, sure. If you want to do it again, like I want the actor to always leave feeling good about themselves.
Right.
And I don't want them to feel like they didn't get a fair enough chance. So then I'll do it again. And then I can tell that based on my response, they then get in their own head, because they were expecting me to say, it was amazing, or whatever it is, you know.
You got the job.
Yeah, like they didn't get that assurance. And then they do it again, and now the thoughts come in, and they're second guessing it, when really that was never my thought in the first place. My thought was, no, that was perfect, and I don't want to waste your time anymore, and I need to get going. So that's really interesting.
Well, and you bring up a good point, and this is something that you know, a little insight to what I do.
Yeah.
The mental rumination is actually a behavior. So, you know, that's mental gymnastics ultimately. So even though it's not physical, you can't see me doing the behavior. Rumination after an event or before, many tools, a lot of them being mindfulness tools, to help manage that rumination and that sort of, again, a lot of the time it's catastrophization, which is there's a distortion of thought where no matter what, your brain takes it to the worst case catastrophe version. So it's understanding and knowing that, and being able to intervene right there before you go into that behavior.
Yeah. Because I think for a lot of actors, they think, I'm not 100% prepared. Why am I here? I should leave. Well, I already signed in now. You know, it's like that they start going through all of these ruminating thoughts. And so, like you said, it's just about using those tools, mindfulness being a big one. Are there any others that you tend to use to intervene with? Or?
Well, you know, to use that example, and this isn't so much mindfulness as it is more of a behavioral thing, but if you can befriend your anxiety, you're going to be so much better off, right? Again, like we said before, is to sort of, it's not a bad thing, right? And sometimes if you can invite it to come with you, it loses its power. Right?
Yeah.
So if you're going, I wish I didn't have anxiety. Why have I had anxiety? I wish it wasn't here. It's got your attention. But if you're like the phrase we use is, anxiety, you can come along, you just don't get to make my choices.
I love that.
Right? You can talk to your anxiety and say, okay, anxiety, we're going in. We're going to do this. You can come. Right? But you don't get to tell me what to do in here, or you don't get to tell me whether I was good or bad. You know, that's up to them to decide. And so sometimes just talking and inviting your anxiety in gives it's powerless at that point.
That's so fascinating. I love it. I know people say, you can see the little emojis like it's such great stuff.
So good, I'm glad.
I've heard actors say, they'll say to me in a class or something after, you know, I went in for a producer session and I had a panic attack, or I've actually had an actor tell me, really sad that they had a panic attack on set, and like the director was like, everyone was waiting. And I don't know if you've ever been on set before, but there's a lot of people, it's very quiet, and there's a lot of people just watching you, like a lot. And so they didn't really know how to handle that situation. And then I've also had people say they had anxiety attacks. So I was just curious, is there an actual difference between like a panic attack and an anxiety attack, or is that just semantics really?
Yeah, no, they're the same thing. I mean, we clinically we would diagnose it as a panic attack. But I mean, anxiety attack is saying the same thing ultimately, is that you went from 0 to 100 in panic, and it's a horrible experience. You know, it's so painful. You feel like you're going to die, and everything goes down. But no, we use the terms interchangeably.
Okay.
The thing to remember about panic, I know I've said this before, but I'll say it again because it's important. The more you try to make it go away, the higher it will go.
Okay.
Right? And so sometimes this is the dialectics of this. Some people get stuck in their head that they can't do two things at once, right? And the truth is, you can do something while having a panic attack. Those two things can exist at the same time.
That is so groundbreaking to hear you say that, because I think actors have a really hard time believing that. Like, I'm going through this mental experience, so I can't possibly keep acting.
Right. You know? Right. Yeah. I mean, it mightn't be your best go, but you can still keep going. And that's a part of the panic. Again, now biologically, your feeling about that isn't wrong. Your brain actually does shut down a little bit of the prefrontal cortex when you're panicking, because it really does think like a bus is coming for you, or you're about to get eaten by a lion. So that feeling like you can't do two things at once will be true, but it's not the facts, right? So if you can actually again be like, all right, I've identified that this is panic, right? What it is that you're doing. You can panic and do something else at the same time.
Yeah, that's great advice. Let me just see if there's any questions down here. Let's see if there's any in the box before we go on a little bit. I don't really know what this is. What about the technique of turning off anxiety to excitement, like Mel Robbins' 5-minute rule? Do you know what the 5-minute rule is?
Oh. No, but I think what I can make an assumption is this is the cool thing. I actually wouldn't, the way I explain it is anxiety isn't that much different to an orgasm. There's like one or two sensations that is different, right? And it's true. If you thought about it, what do you feel when you're sexually aroused? Your heart rate increases, right? You feel butterflies in your tummy. Maybe you're lightheaded, all the things, right? That's not that much different to anxiety. And so a mindset shift there can be like, okay, not all of this is bad. There are sometimes in my life where I enjoy an increase in heart rate. I enjoy butterflies. So I'm assuming that may be what she's talking about. Is, you know, I think too, this is a part cognitive. If you're anxious, you're always going to be swinging negative. Excitement is, yes, I want this, right? And that's a behavioral intervention to say, I want this anxiety. Let's go. Let's do this together.
So I've had, this is just an example that I've heard. Like, I've had a friend who got in a car accident a really long time ago, and it led her to have panic attacks every time she got on a freeway. In an instance like with association, because I know that can happen for actors too, how do you kind of break that association? Do you just not avoid it? Is that how you like disassociate?
Yeah. So this is a type of cognitive behavioral therapy called exposure therapy. It's it's probably one of the most helpful behavioral interventions, which is if you have anxiety about something or someone or some place, the practice is actually to go there and repetitively expose yourself to that in as many contexts as you can. The thing to remember here is you don't go there and be like, I hope I don't have a panic attack. You go there to say, whether I have a panic attack or not, I'm going to be around that area that they had a panic
Yeah.
attack in,
Yeah.
or that person, and so forth. But the reason we do that is with prolonged exposure, with repetitive exposure, we actually have to the perceived danger. And you can change your brain by doing that. We actually have research to show that you're reconnecting parts of your brain that kind of got misfired. And so, yeah, repetitive exposure to the thing you're afraid of is the 100% the most successful way to manage anxiety in that respect.
Yeah. So for actors, that obviously means auditioning is helpful. You know, if you find that you get nervous before or during and you're not really sure, I mean, there's a lot of techniques that we learned about today, but certainly auditioning more exposure, you know, is going to help you with that.
Right. You can go further than that though. So, you know, if you know you have a audition on Melrose or wherever you are, you could go there ahead of time, you know, a day before, and sit there and be there and acclimate to, this is the environment I'm going to be in tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
If you know the studio, you may look at a photo of the studio that you're going to be performing in, and go and just practice breathing as you're exposing yourself to that as well.
That's a great piece of advice for actors who, even if, you know, because we're going to be moving into this like virtual casting world soon, which is, you know, maybe will be easier for them in terms of their anxiety, but, you know, there's still going to be Zooms where there's a lot of different producers looking at them and things like that. But that's a great piece of advice. A lot of us, we're Googleable, you know, and so you can look at our faces and maybe it won't seem so scary, and maybe it'll even look friendly or familiar, so that you have a little bit of familiarity before you walk into this really unknown territory. Really great advice. Yeah.
Well, I would say one more thing, which is give yourself permission to not be perfect. That can actually do wonders for anxiety. Is the less pressure you put on yourself often is a really helpful part of managing anxiety.
Yeah. And I know a lot of actors are sort of in that perfectionist, you know, type A world, which is hard, you know, which can then lead into anxiety, I know. So I wanted to talk a little bit about just, you gave such great insight on anxiety and tools that actors can use. But I wanted to talk a little bit about just mental health in general right now, because especially with our field, and, you know, actors are out of jobs, and not only are they out of jobs, there's a lot of uncertainty as far as when we're going to all be able to go back, and not only when, but how. And that's kind of scary. A lot of actors just started their careers and just poured everything into it, and it all came to a halt. And so that has an effect, you know, on mental health, and I know our community is affected by it. And so, I don't know, I just wanted to hear kind of your take, you know, either from you or in the psychology world on just, you know, how mental health is being affected right now, and things that you are seeing that might be helpful to really anyone.
Right. No, oh my goodness, it's rampant right now.
Yeah.
So, and it's funny because if we had have done this 8 weeks ago, what I would say would be so much different, given that there's this really consistent flux of anxiety.
Oh, it'll go out for a second and then it'll come back. It sometimes does this.
Can you hear me though?
I can hear you, yeah.
We are going through so many different stages of this grief. At the beginning, it was a lot of anxiety, but people aren't talking about the grief that people are having right now. Grief of the life they thought they were going to have, grief of the goals and expectations, and that can come along with depression, and anxiety, as we've talked about today, and actual grieving, right? Grieving is a process that we're all going through. No one has to die for us to grieve. So absolutely, I've seen this roller coaster of my clients going through the different stages of anxiety and grief. Absolutely. I think the thing, you know, the advice I would give everyone is you don't have to be mentally unwell to seek help.
Mm.
It's an important thing to know. A lot of people think that I could only seek help if I'm like really bad. And sometimes it might be that you just need a couple of sessions to tweak some things. And so I always really want to encourage people to, like, if you need help and you want help, absolutely reach out and see if maybe your insurance covers therapy, or you know, there's someone in your area. But again, you don't have to have severe mental illness to seek help. I think the other thing to do is, and so if you can find somebody who's going through similar, I mean, a lot of your people here, I'm sure, are going through similar experiences with specific industry, as with other industries, like the, you know, I know the cosmetic industry right now is, you know, the same, you know, no one's allowed to get a haircut and so forth.
True.
So there's lots of industries that are falling apart. To find somebody who is going through what you're going through, so that you feel less alone in that. It's really important to have someone.
Yeah, I mean, when we go through hard things, we join support groups, you know. And I'm sure there are support groups out there for this, for especially for people who are affected by the virus. But I think it's hard because people feel like if they're generally healthy, then they shouldn't pity themselves, you know, or if they don't have someone directly affected, that they're being silly for pitying themselves, which then manifests into maybe more depression and more anxiety. You know? Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's sad that we have to do that. Like, if you, let's use the metaphor of hunger. If you're starting to feel a little bit hungry, you're not going to say to yourself, like, oh, that's weak, you should wait until it's lunchtime. You know what I mean? Like, it's not lunchtime yet, you can't be hungry.
Can't eat.
If you have something to eat right then, you're going to be happier. So if you're starting to feel like things are getting, I think the thing to remember here is, I think we've been trained to think that therapy is like laying on a couch and like, you know,
let me talk about my problems.
Right? Cognitive behavioral therapy is a fast treatment. We come in, we give you tools, we, like, off you go, because we want to teach you how to do it on your own, right? So it doesn't have to mean that you know, you're in there for 17 months talking about your childhood. It doesn't have to be that way.
Is any of that for does cognitive behavioral therapy have anything to do with going back into like those memories or those, or is it just kind of focused on the present?
You can, because faulty cognitions often get created in childhood. So you can do that work. But typically cognitive behavioral therapy looks at a problem and works to solve it. That's what we do. So I mean, the work with self-compassion is always going to be around being, of course, aware of why we are struggling, and sometimes it is really hurtful messages we received about our bodies, or about what our skin's supposed to look like, and so forth, particularly in the industry you're working in. There's a very strong societal expectation. So you can work through that. But again, our goal is actually to give you tools and you know, hopefully get you on your way, so you can be moving on to what you want to be focusing on.
And that just brings up a really quick kind of side thought when you said, you know, what someone might say has an effect on you, or some, you know, about your image or something like that. And I've had actors say this to me before, where, you know, a casting director told them something about, made a comment about their weight, which, you know, or anything that is offensive, which still blows my mind, because I've been doing this for a long time, and I've never worked in an office where we would ever do something like that, but it has happened. And maybe it will happen to you, but whatever that person has said to you is not a representation of the industry. It doesn't represent what I think. It doesn't represent what hundreds of people think. And that person might have said that for a reason other than what they even actually think. You know, maybe they're having a bad day and they want to take power and take authority for something to make themselves feel better.
Right.
And so they said that to make themselves, which is a terrible tactic, but maybe that's the case. But it just brings up a point of, you know, I've heard actors say, someone said this, my agent once told me this. And so to just remember that that person's, whatever they spewed out to you does not mean it's a fact, you know. Just something that brought up, you know, brought up in my mind because I hear that a lot. And it's not talked about a lot.
Right, it's not. I mean, in my field it is, because we do is, you know, a lot of people in your field require that because it's so much pressure. The cool thing is if we were to use a cognitive tool here, we would check the facts, which is look at the industry right now. There are all shapes, right? Like it used to be that you had to be a certain size and body shape. Now you could be.
And we love all people of all kinds, and I recognize that there has been, we've been lacking in that in the past, and we are working, just again, side tangent, but so incredibly hard to be more inclusive and be more representative, just represent our world and what it really looks like. So those are the facts. You know?
I love it. Yeah, so important. So important.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for doing this. I mean, again, this is not talked about enough amongst actors, and I think there's always an expectation, again, from hearing from their acting coaches and teachers, you have to be confident, but sometimes you don't feel that way, and then what do you do when that lack of confidence or those nerves get the best of you, and how do you change those thoughts and work through it? Because it happens to everybody, not just, you know, your first audition, but it happens, like I said, to major series regulars who have been doing this for years and then walk into a room and I don't know, it happens because we're human, you know? It's even happened to me where an actor came in and they were so nervous and we were at a studio test and I didn't know how to help them. So then I got nervous and kind of panicky, you know, because I was like, I don't know what to do. And we're like, we're syncing together. So I think it's helpful for everybody, really. So thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming on and speaking your words of wisdom.
Oh, my pleasure. Yeah, I'm so grateful to have time to talk to you. Yeah, it's great.
Awesome.
And thank you. I think you're doing a great job.
Thank you. And like I said, you, if anyone wants to take a listen, you have an amazing podcast. Oh, we're losing you for a sec. There we go. An amazing podcast called Your Anxiety Toolkit, right? Which I think you're still working on now. So great podcast. You have some great guests on there. So
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you
so much.
My pleasure.
Stay safe, stay healthy, take care.
Yeah, you too.
I'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
All right, bye.